Okay, just a quick video because I found this kind of annoying and it kind of shows an issue that we have with how men are portrayed in the media. It's another one of those articles about how even though men are more likely to die from corona, it's still somehow worse for women. You can see the headline, "More men get sick, but women bear the brunt of the pandemic." Coronavirus is killing more men, but the lockdown is disastrous for women and their rights. So even though acknowledging that men are more likely to die, it's still worse for women. The novel coronavirus seems to be more deadly for men, but in every other way, women are bearing the brunt of this pandemic. Well, every other way other than dying? A CNN analysis earlier this year found that in countries for which data was available, men were 50% more likely than women to die after being exposed from COVID-19. It's actually 100% more likely because it's double. But experts say purely focusing on health data is dangerous. We think about this crisis in very narrow terms, only focusing on the health impacts, but we're missing the bigger picture. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that dying from a disease is the worst part of that disease. And the group of people that are actually dying are the people being most affected. And I'm not saying the issues in this article aren't valid, but dying is kind of the worst part. And then we had this about how 67% of healthcare workers are women and only 33% are men. So only 1/3 are men. But why should that 33% be left out of the conversation? Like, how come those 33% of healthcare workers shouldn't be mentioned? And people say, oh, that's just a what about the men? But yeah, what about that 33%? I mean, that's so unfair and disrespectful to them because they're doing that same healthcare work. And as men, they have more of a risk of dying. So not only are they still doing that healthcare work, but as men, they're more likely to die. Then you had something like this, which is very misleading, about how women were more likely to lose their jobs. And as you can see, 55% of job losses were women. But that's ignoring the fact that women are more likely to have jobs to begin with because men are more likely to be unemployed. So men are less likely to have jobs to lose. So if one group has more jobs than the other, when a country's economy starts dipping and jobs start getting lost, that group that has more jobs to lose will lose more jobs. That's just basic math. Something else I didn't like was the way this article talked about domestic violence and how it's an issue with lockdown because now people, if they're locked down, they're stuck with their abusive partners. Now, I agree that's obviously a valid concern, but what I don't like is how they only presented it as if women are the ones affected by domestic violence, completely ignoring male victims. I mean, you can see this line, imagine all the women that have been locked down with a man that is causing them harm. Yes, that's perfectly valid. But yes, what about the men? What about male victims? That is a perfectly valid and important point to make. Why shouldn't male victims also be included in the conversation? To not do so is literally discriminatory, and it's perpetuating the dangerous stereotype that men can't be victims. Anyway, I've linked this article in the description below. I think it's a little bit more than just an annoying, kind of stupid article. It kind of reflects how men's lives are devalued in society. If 70% of deaths can be men, but we still have articles about how it's worse for women, or basically that it's not as bad for men, even though men are twice as likely to die. If it was the other way around, and 70% of deaths were women, you would never see an article about how it was worse for men.